Okay, so hi everyone. It's great you made it for the IE-EYM. We'll have Dr. Bernazi, Morgan, Elizabeth, and CJ from IE giving this presentation. So just a reminder, stay muted and have your videos off. And then at the very end, you can ask your questions through the chat. We'll also have an attendance via QR code at the end of the presentation. Okay, so I'll hand it off to IE.
All right, thank you, Bhavini. Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Pearson. I am one of the academic advisors with industrial engineering. As mentioned, we also have Dr. Patrick Bernisi, our Director of Academic Programs, with us today. And we're hoping to share a little bit about IE and what it is and answer any questions you may have.
Okay, so I'm Doc B. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm actually not in front of my usual setup, so trying something different. So we're going to call this Industrial Engineering your major. And this is one of the fun things. Just a little bit of background about me. I am the Director of Academic Programs for the School of Industrial Engineering. I am also an industrial engineer by background. So my BS, MS, and PhD all came from industrial engineering departments. And so I love talking about it. I'm going to apologize up front. I'm not going to be able to join for the whole session. I have another thing that I have to get to, but I'll be here for at least a portion of it. So if you do have other questions that that you don't get answered, just feel free to drop me a line or any of the advisors a line, and we'll make sure we get to you. So I start this session typically over the years. I've done it in lots of different ways. I always like to kind of start assuming that most of you don't know an awful lot about industrial engineering. Normally when we would do this in person, I would do a show of hands. And usually what we find out is that not as many students have a very detailed conception of what IE is, unless you happen to know IEs personally. So that's kind of the framework for how we're going to start. So Morgan or Elizabeth, you can move it ahead. So I like to start IE related as it relates to manufacturing. It's not the only area where IEs work, but it's something that most of you might have some background for thinking about. And I like to use automobile manufacturing because most people know about the cars that they drive or that they see, and they realize that they're fairly complex engineered products. At least I would hope. So if you think about the manufacturing historically, that's kind of how you arrive at industrial engineering. So as a discipline. And so what we find is, if you look back at the history of manufacturing, it's gotten much more complex. We've got way more products. We've got, the ability to customize things to how people want them. Early, production lines. Once again, I often say this and do a show of hands. How many people knew what color, all the different colors you could get a Model T in? If you can remember back to the early Ford production systems. And the answer is you could get it in any color you wanted so long as it was black. And so we've come a long way. And in part, the reason why manufacturing and other forms of production have come a long way is because of the field of industrial engineering. And what you'll see, I hope, by the end of this is that you'll see that there's a lot of parallels to many other types of things based on the core skills that IEs have. And so this is just one example or a set of small examples that get us thinking about industrial engineering as a discipline. So if you look around this photo, you're going to see a lot of stuff. You see people. You're going to see the product itself at the state at which this, I think it's a Lexus, is being made. You're going to see all kinds of technology. It looks like a very cluttered space, although it's very organized. And all of this stuff has to be able to work together. So if we break it down, so you can move it ahead, Elizabeth. The starting point is really materials. We work closely with the different stuff that you might think of as a raw material. We're concerned with how to get this stuff from its raw form into the actual, and since I'm using automotive as a case, I've put up sort of pictures of automotive component parts, get things from one state, from let's say a raw state or a maybe even in between state, into something that is usable and can be integrated into some larger whole, so to speak. So in this case, we have lots of component parts. Most of this is suspension component parts that might make their way into the automobile that's much more complete, as in the photo that's in the background. And so then we're going to add another layer to this. So you can move it forward. We have to think about how we actually get from that state, from one state to the next. So we know we need component parts, we know we have raw materials, and there's lots of means by which we can do those different processing activities. And so what's happening here is that we're concerned with the stuff that's being transformed and the means of transformation. And so in this case, I've got like a milling machine and a 3D printer. And so there's lots of different types of materials. There's lots of different component parts to the systems that we work in. And there's lots of ways of actually moving from one state of being, so to speak, into another. And so we're going to add another layer. You can move it ahead. And in order to accomplish this transformation, we need people. And we need people for lots of different things. We need people to potentially operate the machines or the technology that's going to do the transformation. We need people to do assembly. We need people to do the management of the system. We need quality and a whole host of other functions. And at lots of different stages, we're going to have people interacting with this transformation process. And finally, let's add one more layer. We also need to know how to extract and use the information that arises at the different stages, you know, that goes into potentially the nature of the materials that we have. We also need to know about the information on the process itself that does the transformation. We need to know how well the people are working. We need to know a lot of different things, or we can extract a lot of different types of information in order to ensure that the systems that we make actually produce what we say it's going to, as much as we need it to, when we need it to, and so forth. And so industrial engineers do something it's quite a bit different in many ways than most of the other engineering majors that are out there, in that we're looking at this integration of materials or things that get transformed, people, technology, or another way of thinking about it is the stuff that does transformation, and information. And so you might think about it as we're the engineers who fit all of these different puzzle pieces together, these different elements together, in order to get the systems that actually, let's say, do production. So the actual manufacturing systems, or it could be much more, it could be much different than that. It could be a healthcare system. It could be a service system like a bank, or if you think of you know, a warehouse or something along those lines. These are all still mixes of stuff that's getting transformed, stuff that's doing transformation, people, and information. And so this is what we do. We design human integrated systems. And so we don't tend to design the physical stuff that you might buy, but we design pretty much everything else about the systems that would make that into a saleable product or service. So you can move it ahead. And so what you see, if you look at this a little bit more broadly, and I just gave kind of a window out, is that pretty much all of industry or the industries that you might be familiar with are some form or at some point in time have major human integrated systems that require design and management and improvement and lots of other types of perspectives. And so I'm still using manufacturing kind of as an example, but we have the materials that could come on plane or boat or train. We have the tracking mechanism so that we know where things are in a process. That's, you see barcodes and SCM, that's supply chain management, which is a subfield of industrial engineering. We have the information gathering, which could be time, it could be quantities, it could be lots of of stuff. And so there's all of these different elements that allow us to get, in this case, a product from raw material to the customer. And so I'm using a very limited set of examples because we don't get a lot of time to talk about this in these sessions. So what I want you to think about, though, is that mix of people, technology, materials, and information. And if you start looking at the systems around you, the companies that are out there making products, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the background that requires design, that requires this mix, these human integrated systems. And that's where the industrial engineering domain is. So you can move it ahead. And so once again, human integrated systems. It doesn't roll off the tongue. So we use industrial engineering as a better way of thinking about what we do, because we literally work in every industry. So because just about every industry has some form of these types of systems. And keep going. And so if you look at it, this is a complex problem because, what types of materials do we use is an important question. Nowadays, where do you put the people is an important question. And this is two examples of manufacturing facilities, one that's almost entirely automated, one where you have a robot working side by side with humans. So as you think about these problems of organizing technology and people and materials and information, there's lots of different options for even just simple robot arms. They have different capacities, they have different working envelopes, they have different capabilities in terms of speed, dexterity, and many other things. And they have different capabilities in their ability to work with humans on a task. And so when we have to make these decisions, we're trying to say, what's the right mix of technology? What's the right mix of people? Where do we put everything so that we can do these tasks, we can build these systems as efficiently as possible? So you often hear industrial engineers associated with the concept of efficiency. And so these are very hard problems to solve because it's a lot of parameters that impact the successful design and operation of one of these systems. And onward. And so we operate at, another point is that we operate at lots of different levels of scale. So, if we were talking about the workstation that human and that robot were occupying, designing that effectively so that both the human and the robot can operate as safely and efficiently as possible is one scale that IEs might work at. And then I have this slide, which is my crude, I'm a bad artist, so this is my crude attempt at art, but we're also asking the question about where do we put this stuff in a much broader sense? So how do we design the supply chain? So where do we put the warehouses, which let's say are the squares? Where do we put the manufacturing facilities, which might be the ovals? And I'm just using the US as an example, but we ask these questions at a global scale. And so we're working at scales at really small levels, and we're working at scales at really gigantic levels, or what I would think of as a giant problem. When you're talking about thousands of miles and large amounts of product, that's a pretty big problem to solve. Onward. And so the other thing that I like to emphasize is that the design of human integrated systems, when you have so many different types of components that you use, when you have so many different types of people that you could incorporate in the system, and so many different types of materials and so forth, is that we might be able to design technically an infinite number of versions of the system that all work, that all might actually produce what we want it to produce, either as a product or a service. We have to be able to find the best one. And often that boils down into the one that makes the most money, or the one that saves the most money, depending on the nature of the design problem that we have. And so industrial engineers, we're going to use these complex math and science tools, but we're going to end up using them to make business decisions. And which is often a very different perspective than many of the other engineering majors have, which is an equally important question is, can we do it? Can it be made in general? We're asking not only can it be made, but can it be made and make money? And so this also keeps us closely tied to the business community and so forth. So you often hear about industrial engineers being very closely tied to sort of management or other types of business roles where we're talking about operations and design, but we're talking about it in a very sort of monetary way. And so we don't quite sit fully in any one of the traditional perspectives that you might have around engineering or business and so forth, but we sit kind of in that intermediate where we have really complex engineering tools, but at the same time, we're also looking at really practical usages of these tools in order to make sure that products and services reach, the customers who want them and need them. And so one more. And so this is just a quote that we have our own internal job fair. So one of the folks came back and we were doing a debrief about how well it went. And this is one thing that we hear is that mixture of, the technical competence with the ability to understand the impact on businesses is really what helps set industrial engineers apart, and why especially they like coming to Purdue to recruit their IEs. So onward. And so, as I mentioned, IEs work in pretty much every industry. And so this is a set of companies that have been very active recruiting our students in recent years. And if you look at it, you're seeing automotive, you're seeing consulting, if you're familiar with PwC's work, you're seeing pharmaceuticals, IT, heavy equipment, healthcare products, which is Roche, and then designing experiences at Disney and things of that nature, where you're not thinking about sort of the traditional type of products or services. And so you're looking at a pretty wide set. So if we look a little bit deeper, then you can move on. There we go. This is the types of roles that our specific alumni have held at these companies. And so this is a range of experience levels, from new hires all the way through senior, maybe close to retirement type of people. So you're going to see a range of types of roles, and you'll see everything from kind of traditional types of industrial engineering roles that would be like a manufacturing engineer or a product engineer or a product manager, reliability. But you're also going to see stuff that doesn't look a lot like a traditional engineering role, like somebody who's running HR at a company, or someone who is like I guess Lily's probably got the two best examples, the compensation analyst, where that's more of an HR and business services kind of role. And if we go onward, you'll see even more examples all the way through other types in finance. You'll see stuff in sales, you'll see stuff in quality, and all the way through the highest levels of the organization. So you'll see things like VP, director, chief officers, and so forth. And so an IE career is really just a baseline, the stuff that you learn is really just a baseline that you can build on. And having that human integrated systems perspective provides a lot of opportunity, because even just about any organizational unit within a business is a complex human integrated system, and could use the types of abilities that our students graduate with. And so it's extremely flexible. Basically us and mechanical engineering tend to have the claim to broadest kind of career paths and so forth as engineers, and there's certainly good reason for that. So I think we can move on. And so I'm going to pass it back off to Elizabeth. And like I said, I apologize. I have to jump off and head to something else. But if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. We'd be glad to talk more.
Thanks, Doc B. All right, so I'll be kind of picking up from here and talking a little bit more about what you would be doing here at Purdue to become an IE. So Doc B talked about after graduation, kind of that big broad mindset of what do IEs do. We've noticed a lot of students come into Purdue and they don't really know what an industrial engineer is. So we like to start with that and then move into some of the more kind of, I guess, stats and nitty gritty of it all. So with our curriculum overview, as you can see, at Purdue, what we look for is we have our students complete core, everything in the core foundations of what IE is. So there are these different emphasis areas and within industrial engineering. So if you look on our website, you'll see emphasis areas, and that's not necessarily, you don't have to choose one of those areas. It's not transcripted or anything. IEs from Purdue, we teach you a little bit of everything so that when you go out into the workplace, you are this really versatile engineer that can kind of go into any environment and be able to pick it up and immediately make an impact. But within IE, we have human factors and systems, decisions making, operations research, which is basically using math to make business decisions, broadly speaking. You have some of the supporting things such as our probability and statistics. There's a lot of probability and statistics involved within IE. Production systems and manufacturing, other areas, those are kind of the main areas that IEs really touch on. And then from there, there's a lot of other things that can jump off of those areas. So we have a really flexible curriculum. We do have core courses that students have to take, but even those, it's not super rigid. Like if you miss a course in one semester, it's not going to delay your graduation a whole year, typically. So we use so there's the flexibility within the core curriculum, and then also you have your elective courses, so your technical electives and your general electives, that allows our students to really personalize their degree plan depending on what your goals and aspirations are. One thing you would have noticed with Doc B, especially in the 2 slides with all of the jobs, titles, and stuff that our alumni hold, it's really broad. There's a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different areas that our students really enjoy looking into and pursuing after graduation. And so allowing the space while they're here at Purdue to take some courses that help them to build up their skill set for those areas, we try and really allow the opportunities to maximize that. So a lot of our students, about 45%, have a minor. It's not required, and there are plenty of students that don't go with a minor. But some of the very common to have a management or economics minor. It fits really well with our electives. It gives some of the more really heavy on like the business side. If a student is especially thinking between maybe business and MBA later on, they will often choose to pursue a management or economics minor. You'll see some of the other ones on there, even some more of the technical side, so statistics, math, but then also communications, political science, psychology. Like Dr. B mentioned, IEs meet with a lot of people. So usually they work with the human integrated systems. And so knowing how people operate, how people think and tend to function, broadly speaking, that can be really beneficial when IEs are designing their systems or processes and whatnot. So we often see that with our students as well. We do offer a software specialization within IE. That's something that if you're interested in that, you can always talk with one of the IE advisors. Usually that's completely within the plan of study and electives. So just a way to really kind of up your technical skills if that's something that you're interested in. And then also on the other side, this certificate of entrepreneurship, very common for our students to at least start that certificate. To really have an entrepreneurial kind of spirit to a lot of our students. So if that's something that kind of gets you curious, that's often a pathway that people like to take. Other opportunities, we do have a lot of students that participate in undergraduate research, and not just those that are interested in becoming faculty or going to graduate school. Research offers a really different kind of learning experience and environment for students. And so we like to encourage that where possible. And you can take that for credit as well. And then like the co-op, which one of our fairly recent alumni is on the call as well. We'll be talking to her later on. She was a co-op student while she was at Purdue. And so we do have some students that participate in that co-op program and GEAR. And then it's very easy to study abroad. And I have a couple of slides with that later on. So speaking of global experiences, so we are very supportive of sending students abroad. We think that we live in a global industry environment around the world. You are most likely, no matter what company, even if you end up just working for a US-based company, you're more than likely going to be interacting with someone internationally at some point, or there could be an influence there. So we like to encourage students to reach out, create a global experience, be that on campus here by joining a club or something like that, or by actually going abroad either short-term or long-term. There's many options for students. We say if we can make it work on your plan, we'll send you there. So usually it's with some electives. It depends on where students want to go. But you can see some of the opportunities that we've had students go to before for semester and then even in the summer. We do have a couple of programs that are within the IE department where you can spend like a month overseas and get some credits, and it's a pretty cool experience. So leadership and development opportunities within the school. These are some of the largest student organizations that our students participate in. You see the Institute for Industrial and Systems Engineers, or IISE. That is the largest professional organization for industrial engineers in the world. So that is well beyond school. They do have student chapters, which is what we have here. We do have one of the best student chapters in the US, very, very active, about 200 members. You have great opportunities for leadership. The ISE student chapter is the one who they put on our career fair. So we do host an IE career fair in the fall and in the spring for just our IE students, and the student organization runs it. So they get a lot of networking opportunities with companies and recruiters and just learning a lot of those components with job hiring and whatnot. So it's really cool. We do have a couple others there that are more specific to some of those various areas I mentioned earlier, such as Human Factors and Ergonomics Society and Informs for Operations Research. Those are, if there's like some of those classes that you go into, if you find you really like human factors, you're really interested in operations research, these are student organizations that dive more deeply into those areas. You see Healthcare Improvement, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, Open School. That is a student chapter looking at how can you improve the processes in the healthcare realm. So some really interesting broad ways you wouldn't think of necessarily an engineer in the healthcare field. And then the bottom two, Purdue Solutions and Purdue Think, are both our consulting student organizations. Purdue Think works, broadly speaking, Purdue Think works on consulting jobs within Purdue University and the Purdue system. And then Purdue Solutions is a student organization that finds consulting jobs outside of Purdue. So they may work with a local business or a company or something like that to work on a consulting job. And so it's really great work experience, especially if you are interested in a consulting, technical consulting kind of profession later on. Other student experiences. So we like to try and diversify our portfolio for the students. There are lots of opportunities. So we've had many students to participate in a student startup, get their company going while they're still completing their degree. There's just a few listed there. Also the career fairs, as I mentioned, we do have IE, which is internal, of course. These are numbers from last year. So last fall we had about 50 companies and 25 in the spring in Industrial Roundtable, or IR as we know it. Last year we had the third most companies coming to look for IEs in all of engineering. So we had 219 companies out of the 300 plus that came to IR last year. We're coming and looking specifically for IE students. So we are well recruited across the technical career fairs, but then also over in Krannert. As you can see, the Krannert career fairs also recruit our students as well. Just they're looking for, that's one of the perks of IE is we can kind of move back and forth between those different fields. We do offer a lot of alumni engagement, one of which will be coming up in a little bit. But in our sophomore seminar class, our senior capstone, and then we also have a two-way mentoring program, which is non-academic within our department. And that is just, those are ways we try and bring alumni physically back to campus if we can. This semester, it's a lot of virtual, but we want to get alumni engaged with the students. You know, the alumni, they're where you want to be. And so they're the ones who can best speak to what life is like as an industrial engineer in industry working in today's world and environment. So we really try and make those connections as much as possible. And then, of course, we also have professional development opportunities, Six Sigma Green Belt certification. If you don't know what that is yet, go ahead and Google it. It has to do with production and working within the companies to make things more efficient, run more efficient, save money for companies. It can be a really good certification to have on your resume, especially coming out of college as you're entering the job market. It's a great certification that recruiters would recognize, and it would help you with the strength of your application. So a couple of numbers, because you guys love numbers. We have a large, diverse program. So we're highly ranked. We are a 3rd undergraduate program as of 2019, last year, and then 6th in the graduate level. The 2nd largest IE program in the US, and we are just under 800 students registered this semester. Still about a 70-30 male-female ratio, and then 75-25 domestic students versus international students, with over 40 countries represented. So really cool, very diverse. We call it an IE family, even though it's 800 students. There's usually one section of IE classes each semester, and so students really get to know one another, even though it is, Purdue is very large and the school is very large itself. And then we are housed in Grissom Hall, which is right next to the Union off Grant Street. You might not, next to the big pit right now, all that construction that's going on by Conoy off Grant Street. So that's enough for me. And I would like to turn it over to Annalise Smith. And this will be kind of some Q&A options from here on out. Annalise is one of our young alumni. Gosh, I don't remember exactly when you graduated.
2017.
There we go. Okay. So 2017, she does work with the Walt Disney Company, and she's a senior business integration analyst. I'm going to stop sharing real quick so we can all look at Annalise, and it'll be great. So if you guys have questions, I know that's a lot of time for question and answer. You can put your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. If you'd like to unmute yourself and you're brave enough to speak up, we more than welcome that. That's great. So we have one in the chat right now. Let's see. Can I join the Institute of Industrial and Systems Engineers organization as a freshman? No, you have to be in industrial engineering in order to join IISE. And actually, Annalise was part of IISE. So Annalise, why don't you actually give a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your time at Purdue, what you were involved with, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, of course. So again, like Elizabeth said, I graduated from Purdue not too long ago in 2017. Also, congratulations. Purdue is an awesome school, and it's a really awesome launch point for engineering in general. But I attended one of these my freshman year, like everybody else does. And I actually came into Purdue thinking that I wanted to be a biological or biomedical or anything involving the healthcare system engineering. And I actually listened to this and found out that I really was interested in industrial engineering. Industrial engineering really looks at the overall picture and the process, and it's more of the people side of engineering than the rest of the engineering types. Typical other engineering, you're working more on machines or aspects of a machine product or something like that. It tends to center around those types of things, whereas industrial engineering, you can focus on any of those types of things. Because you're really helping the overall picture and the overall process come together at the end of the day. So I did about 5 years at Purdue. The reason I did that is because I was in the co-op program. So I can also talk about that if you have questions about that. But I worked for General Motors and for Disney while I was in school and switched between school and work every semester. So I left school with about 2 full years of industry experience, which was really helpful when I was looking for a job. And that also led me to get a job at Disney. So I've been at Disney since I graduated. I've actually bounced around a lot. I've worked in industrial engineering specifically at Disney, which is working primarily with the parks and the resorts and working on efficiencies within those areas. I've also worked in sales analytics and insights, which was really working with our sales teams and how do we grow the business. So it was definitely more of a business side and a math side of things, which was actually quite interesting, not what I was expecting to do at all. And now I'm working with HR, which I also was not expecting to do at all. But I've morphed into a project manager, and I've been working on things like Disney just acquired 21st Century Fox, and how do you merge the two companies together? And then in the recent economic downfall that we've had with the pandemic. We've been looking at how the heck do you get people to where they need to be and keep them as safe as possible. So it's been extremely innovative. I've been very deeply involved in COVID, furlough, how do we return people to work? And my career has 100% taken different paths that I didn't think I would go, but industrial engineering opened up those paths. I think another great thing that Elizabeth mentioned is the Institute for Industrial and Systems Engineering. I was part of it. It actually used to be called IIE, which was just the Institute of Industrial Engineers, but they added the systems to it because it's such a big part of industrial engineering. But that is an amazing club. It opened up so many opportunities for everybody that I was in the club with. It helped me a lot. I networked with a ton of different companies. So that is a really great club to join. And it's a really great club, not only professionally, but relationally as well. It's a strong family. I still talk with all the people that I was in the club with today. And we actually just were talking about doing some type of reunion sometime soon. So it's a really great way to meet people in your major as well.
Well, you've got quite a few questions here in the chat. So how did you come to work with Disney?
Good question. So it started with the co-op. So at first Disney used to be super involved with the co-op program, and then they backed off for a little bit. I think it was around 2008. Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was when we had an economic downfall. And so they backed off of that for a little bit, and they have recently, within the past couple of years, came strong back into the co-op program. So my first 2 years or 2 terms with co-op, I was with General Motors, and then I switched to Disney. That's not typical within the co-op program, so they don't necessarily like you doing that type of thing. But I was able to talk through it and really promise myself to both companies. But yeah, so I started with co-oping with them. So I did 3 different terms with them, 2 in Florida and then 1 out in California. And then after I graduated, it was a lot easier to get a job with Disney because I already had experience with them. They really, truly, once you intern or get your foot in the door with them, they truly hold on to their people as much as they can. So Institute of Industrial Engineering, Disney comes and talks all the time to that group. Co-op, they don't necessarily come to IR. Every other year they will come. But there's a lot of opportunities to talk to them. And also, if you have further questions about that, I can share my email with Elizabeth and you can always ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. Next one, let's see. Could you please give an example of how you improved ride efficiency at Disney?
Yeah, of course. That's also a very good question. So let's see, specifically to attractions, that was actually my first year at Disney. So I was the industrial engineering intern at Epcot. So I worked on the spaceship Earth, which is actually in the ball, which is behind me. So we were looking at how many cars do you need to have on the system so that you can efficiently get those that are handicapped or disabled in any type of way on and off the ride and not slow down the ride. So the ride is what we call an omni-mover. It continuously goes around all the time, and we have to slow it down for those that struggle to get on those types of rides. So we looked at how many carts do we need to do? How do we load and unload those types of people? Do we do them all at one time? Do we let them ride multiple times in a row? Anything to increase the capacity and keep the line moving. So what we ended up coming up with after doing several studies, mostly looking at how people get on and off the ride in the handicap facility. And then also looking at how many handicapped cars or disabled cars we have in that specific ride. And so we determined what was the optimal number of cars that they have. And then it actually was better to let them circle through twice than it was to let them go on just once, because it gave us more time in between the load and unload to let more people circle through. So less slowdowns.
Very cool. What has your office / floor balance been like throughout your career so far?
That's also a really good question. So when I was with General Motors, so again, they're an automotive company, I actually did 2 different stints with them. I did one at the headquarters in Michigan, and I did another one at a plant. So when I was with headquarters in Michigan, I would say probably about 70% of my job was in the office. However, I would go down to like model floors that we had where it simulated plant structure and the assembly lines to look at how the ergonomics of actually putting an engine together looked like. Because I was working on designing a new engine assembly line. So that was about 70 because we would go on business trips to actually look at certain plants that had just come on and were having issues, or plants that had been running their lines for a long time to understand where they had found efficiencies. So that one was very interesting. And then when I was actually at the plant, I spent probably 90% of my time on the floor. I was primarily working with those that were on the line, trying to understand where there was efficiencies and where we could find better ways to put an engine together to make it safer for them, faster for them, and then more efficient for the company in general. In terms of Disney, with industrial engineering, I would say it's like 60% in the parks and resorts when you're with industrial engineering. A lot of your projects end up being either at the hotels or at the parks themselves. There's also groups that work with the Imagineers. Yes, industrial engineering is separate from Imagineering. Imagineering actually consists of a lot of designers. So the designers come up with the 10-year, 20-year plan, and the industrial engineers and the other engineers from all over the company come in to say, okay, this is what's actually physically possible, and you need to consider these types of things in order to put that into stance. So they work hand in hand together to come up with those creative ideas that's also physically possible and will work within the space. So with that, again, it's actually pretty frequent when you're with the industrial engineering department that you're in the parks or the resorts. Sales analytics and insights, I was 100% in the office. I did not touch the parks at all. However, it seems like it would be boring because you're in the office all the time, but you run from different building to building. You get to see all the conference areas because the salespeople are the ones who sell weddings, or they sell conferences, or all those other types of things. So it's not like I was stuck in my single office all the time. You do move around quite a bit. And then same with HR, it's pretty much 100% of the time in the office, but I'm working with the international partners a lot more. So I'll have calls with Latin America, or I'll have calls with China. We've recently been doing a lot with our European partners as we're working to get some of our cruise lines back up, since Europe is opening up some more from the pandemic backlash. So yeah, it's very different experience wherever you go. I know that a lot of friends that I have in the healthcare industry, a lot of times they're on the floor as well, working directly with nurses or pharmacists or the doctors themselves to understand how to do layouts within the rooms, or how to lay out an actual hospital floor to make it as effective as possible as well.
Awesome. Thank you. There was a couple of questions that were not related to Annalise that I kind of glanced over before because I wanted for continuity, but there was a question about financial engineering and then healthcare engineering. So financial engineering, broadly speaking, is using math to predict the stock market. It's something that we don't do a lot of here at Purdue just because we don't have a stock market in West Lafayette. I didn't know if you guys knew that or not. Not the thriving metropolis that New York or Chicago is. So those areas of study are really much more closely located to the New York Stock Exchange, or up in Chicago, or sometimes over out in LA, just where the really, really big financial companies are. It is something that we do offer a class once or twice, like every couple of years, just for an introductory to that. But most of the time, our students that are interested in financial engineering, it's a lot of math, a lot of economics, and then going off to graduate school in one of those kind of hot spots for financial engineering in order to be able to work there and then get their foot in the door at a financial firm. And for healthcare engineering, Annalise, you actually know some people that work in the healthcare field. So can you share a little bit about maybe what they do, what you've heard them say?
Yeah, of course. So recently, there's broad versions of healthcare engineering. So you can do things in terms of actually looking at hospital floors and trying to figure out where to put specific tools or specific stations for nurses or any of that type of stuff, and looking at the overall layout and efficiency of the physical building. I've heard of people working with pharmacies and how to do distribution of the different types of drugs and medications and whatnot. So it's really looking at a logistics problem of how do you get something from point A to point B in the most efficient and effective process. I've also heard of, oh, now I blanked. They've done things in terms of just looking at the overall health organization. So people have done consulting before with health organizations and how do they run their business more effectively. Because honestly, there's a lot of issues in healthcare organizations where they aren't getting the money because people can't necessarily afford their bills. And so how do they balance pro bono type of surgeries or healthcare with the side that actually pays for the healthcare? So there's a lot to do with that.
Yeah, a question did come in about the co-op program, wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your experience working with these big companies as an undergraduate. And I would even tack on another question, because we get this a lot, of why the co-op program versus just doing a bunch of internships. Like, why the change? Why the difference?
I am a huge fan of the co-op program. I think that it makes you stick out a lot more than general internships. Again, I did a 5-year plan, but I had 2 full years of experience before I left, which is very uncommon to have by the time you graduate. Most people will have about a year maximum if you just do internships. You can also do, so I did 5 sessions, which is I worked 5 different times outside of school. So I worked twice with General Motors and then 3 times with Disney. You can also do a 3-year plan. And then I think I saw there's a flex one, which I'm assuming you can choose however long you want to work. That's new. They didn't have that when I was there. But it is a very awesome program. They actually, based on your GPA, you're able to join the program at the beginning. So you do have to hit a certain mark of GPA in order to join the program. But companies come from all over for a specific fair for co-op students. So co-op students actually have their own career fair, separate from all the other career fairs that are going on. And those companies, you actually get matched with companies based on questions that you answer and questions that they have about students. And they look through your resume. So it's a lot smaller pool that they're looking at. So it's a lot easier to get a job with a co-op program. And it also grooms you to do different things. So typically with co-op programs, you get to see multiple areas of the company versus with internships, because they only have you for so long, you typically stay in one section. So co-oping was incredible. Again, even though I had to do a little bit longer with school and I did switch between school and work every semester, it was great. I felt like it went really well with my education because I was getting hands-on experience. And by the time I would go and learn this stuff in classes, I would already understand what they were talking about because I had done that at that point. Or things that I had learned in class, my next internship, I was doing it. And so I was really taking the education and applying it to real world situations and problems. And it's not like you don't get that in internships, you 100% do. It's just you have a lot longer with a co-op program because you'll have a full semester versus 2 months. That you can work on projects, and typically it takes about a month for you to really ramp up into the job that you're on. So in internships, you get a month to ramp up and a month to prove yourself with the program or whatever project you're doing. In a co-op, you have a month to ramp up and then 4 full months after that to really show what you're made of. So I think it's a really good program, but again, it's not for everybody, but I would highly suggest it if you're interested.
Cool. And then how and when do you apply for the co-op program?
Again, so after your first semester of engineering, they actually send out letters to anybody who's hit that threshold of the GPA. So you'll get emails/letter that tells you about the co-op program, and they'll let you know that you're invited to come to essentially a call out to let you know all about the co-op program, and they'll bring people in. So typically like seniors or juniors will come in and talk about their experiences as well.
Yeah, and there's also more information on the co-op website yourself as far as like that threshold GPA question just came in for that. So all of that information will be on the co-op website for any of those things changing, because I know they have done some innovations. Annalise mentioned like the flex co-op and stuff like that. So the most up-to-date information for the co-op would be on their website there. We did have one question. So have you used coding or programming in your jobs?
I have, but it's not to the level that you necessarily utilize in school. So like at Purdue, you usually have to get training with C++, PHP. I don't even remember all the ones that we did, R, Python, all that type of stuff. So it's not like you don't use that. It's actually a really good introduction of how to teach yourself languages, because you will eventually have to learn something. I had to reteach myself SQL, because you learn it in school, but when you don't use it very often, you kind of have to retrain yourself. But I had the education on how to train myself, that it really helped me in the long term. But again, that SQL is mostly for just pulling data. I've also used things such as FileMaker. So at Disney with industrial engineering, they actually use this technology called FileMaker, where they make specific data collecting apps, so that you can do real-time timestamps or real-time data collection while you're watching things in the parks or in the resorts. We actually use it differently than it was meant to be used, but you do, it's easy coding. So you don't have to be a phenomenal coder. I 100% am not a good coder at all. Those were the subjects that I needed help with. But then there's other people who love coding and they use it all the time. I have people who did industrial engineering with me who are way more technically savvy than I am with manipulating data and constructing databases and all that stuff. And honestly, we have different skill sets, and we build off of each other to better what we're doing in our work. So whatever you feel comfortable with is what you'll probably end up doing.
Great. And then, Bhavini, I'm not sure, what time does this session end?
So we have it officially going to 6:30.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, we can extend it as you need.
Okay, I just want to be sensitive to time. So there was a question about, Annalise, your email. I was thinking LinkedIn, better option for that. And so let's see. So if you guys look in the participants column section, you can see how to spell Annalise's name, copy it, put it over in LinkedIn. She's the one that works at Disney. And so that'll give a good option for that. So.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to message me. I was in the same shoes as you all were, and I had people who talked to me about it, and so I always appreciated that. So I always love helping Purdue graduates as well.
Yeah, good piece of advice for all of you guys. Utilize your student card while you have it. Hi, Purdue alum. I'm just a lowly little freshman student. Not that that's a bad thing. I don't know what I want to do. Can I pick your brain? Those alumni, even in really high positions, are much more likely to respond and be like, get this student on my calendar. I want to talk to them, than someone, once you graduate, there's an automatic assumption of they're looking for a job. And so utilizing that student card now, making cold conversations like this and things, start your network now to establish for later on, for when you're trying to get those jobs and stuff.
I also wanted to talk, we didn't talk about this. I think somebody had asked about study abroad too.
Oh yeah.
Study abroad is amazing. There's several opportunities within industrial engineering that they do. I got to utilize 2 different short-term study abroads. So there's one that's specific to industrial engineering, where you work with industrial engineering and healthcare. At the same time, we worked with a nursing program and went to Rome for that. So we did about 10 days in Rome, and then you had 6 classes when you were at Purdue, and that amounted to 3 credits, which is amazing. You never get 3 credits off of that short amount of time with a class. And it was such an awesome program because we worked with students from Rome and partnered with them and did projects with them. And so not only did you get to learn about how different our method of education is versus their method of education, but you also really got to learn about Rome from the perspective of people who live there. That's not necessarily a typical thing with study abroad programs. You don't always get to work with students who are from that area. I actually went on a second study abroad program through the School of Communications, and we were learning about global communications and looking at, how do you interview either interviewing people one-on-one or going to an interview and all that stuff. And so it was definitely more of like a global communications based type of class. But everybody that I was in the class with, everybody was from Purdue. It was all in English, but we went to Spain. And I really did miss that level of learning from Spanish students and all that stuff. I mean, granted, we did meet a few people who were from Spain, but we had to work at doing that versus the industrial engineering program, you already had that set up for you.
So Elizabeth, what do you think? We can do QR code, and anyone who wants to stay back.
Yeah, that sounds good. Annalise, I don't know. I don't want to keep you. It's Labor Day.
No, it's fine. I can stay longer.
Okay. Yeah, we can stay back for, we'll call it 10 minutes or so in case people have individual questions or anything like that.
Okay, so I'll put up the QR code, everyone, and then if you have trouble scanning the QR code, then enter your full name and your Purdue email ID in the chat. So you should already have these instructions. I'll go straight to the QR code, okay? And just scan it with your phones. And then feel free to leave once you have scanned it and marked your attendance.
And for any of you that maybe have more questions that you think of later on about IE, Purdue, what IEs can do, we are always willing to talk to FYE students. You can make appointments in Boiler Connect using Engineering Professional School Inquiry. If you can't find it, just email one of the IE advisors. All of our information is on the IE website for contacting us. And so just shoot us an email. We can help you set up an appointment. We're doing things virtually right now. So it would be a Zoom or a WebEx of some kind, but we'd be happy to talk to you about IE and answer any questions that you have.
So I'm just gonna check the chat really quick. Yeah, so when there's a question on whether there are questions when you log in. So yeah, when you scan the QR code, you log in, and then there's a few survey questions, so just answer those. And if you're having trouble with the link, just enter your full name and Purdue email ID into the chat. Okay, so I will stop sharing unless someone stops me in the chat. Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat for you
No.
yet. Yeah.
No. Sure.
Shayak, if you want to ask it out loud, you can.
Hi, can I ask my question?
Sure.
So, is the co-op program with the industrial engineering course, industrial engineering program, is it like extremely hectic or is it manageable?
I think it's pretty manageable, to be honest. The program has been integrated with Purdue for a very long time. So it's pretty well mapped out. It was not hard for me to finish my classes. I actually found it easier to finish my classes because I had the experience from work versus some of the other people, especially at the beginning, because I had more job experience at the beginning versus towards the end. I mean, I still had a bit more in terms of internships, but we all had kind of caught up to around the same level of understanding job-wise. But no, I think it's manageable. There's definitely co-ops who have done it in 4.5 years versus 5. It is very hard to do 4 years with the co-op program because you do switch off and you usually are skipping at least one semester of school. So summer school is definitely a necessity. However, one of my summer school versions, I did the study abroad. So to me, it didn't feel like I was in summer school at all.
Okay, thank you so much for the information.
Of course.
Could you please explain more about like the financial engineering and like almost the career path of going into like the financial sector, like almost Wall Street?
Yeah. So because we don't have a lot of like internships and students that go into it, I don't have a super detail on, like, I don't have a great knowledge on this, but I can share what I have. So what you said, yeah, going into Wall Street, managing hedge funds, working on, I know we actually just had a recent grad where he created an algorithm to predict basically when to buy and sell stocks, and to simplify it. So the idea is he's moving it into, I think, into an app space. He's out in Silicon Valley right now looking for like startup money and stuff like that. And so he's got a website and he's moving pretty well, actually. And so the idea is he's using math, using the algorithm to incorporate the predictive analytics into but in the context of the stock market. So trying to predict what ebbs and flows are going to come, and then that way it gives people an edge in order to, when do I buy, when do I sell, so that you can make more money, manage hedge funds, manage just regular portfolios, financial portfolios, and things of that nature. It is a lot of math. There's a lot of math involved, and then some of the economic side, like game theory and stuff. But we have some information on our website for the emphasis area on financial engineering. It's just a web page we have where it gives a little bit more information about what is this, how could you utilize your electives and your coursework to build your skill set to set you up to be able to try and go into that field.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Got 2 more minutes. Any other questions?